Respected Chairperson and all the delegates. Myself, Dr. Sulakshna, Assistant Professor at Department of Anesthesiology and Critical Care at SRMS IMS Bareilly. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to have a talk on such an emerging topic, that is heparin-induced thrombocytopenia and its relevance in COVID-19. So before I proceed, I want to declare that I have no conflict of interest, and my only interest is in knowledge sharing and knowledge upgradation. So what is heparin-induced thrombocytopenia? As the name reveals, it is a immune-mediated disorder or a non-immune mediated disorder that is manifested by thrombocytopenia because of heparin with or without thrombosis. So historically, it has been of two types, type 1 and type 2. And mankind has known this anticoagulant potential of this heparin for more than 100 years, but it was not in 1958 when the first time by Weizmann and Tobin, the prothrombotic potential of heparin was demonstrated. They have reported a case of arterial embolism occurring during systemic heparin therapy. So they are of two types, type 1 where there is only thrombocytopenia, and type 2 which is manifested by thrombocytopenia with thrombosis. Though they are categorized like immune mediated and non-immune mediated, but they are not different, and they are actually the single entity but components of a same spectrum. So when you move on to the pathophysiology of this heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, you will see that they are red. This heparin is there, and their platelet factor 4 are present on the surface of the platelets, and these platelet factor 4 and heparin actually make complexes, and they behave as an antigen, and for which the body reacts in the formation of immune antibodies, that is IgG. This IgG and this heparin and platelet factor 4 complex make some immune complexes, and then they behave in two different ways. They go and attach to the Fc gamma 2 RA receptor of the platelets. So, and further on, they behave in two ways. Either these platelets are removed by the splenic macrophages, and thus resulting into plain thrombocytopenia, and that is known as type 1 hit, or they may cause the activation of platelets and releasing some procoagulant microparticles, and thus perpetuating a vicious cycle of thrombosis. And this is known as type 2 hit, that is heparin-induced thrombocytopenia with thrombosis. So in this pathophysiology, it is very clear that there are some four components. First, for the diagnosis of hit, there should be history of administration of heparin. Then there should be a time lag. Time lag is needed because the body should respond in the form of a production of antibody targeted at this heparin and platelet factor 4 complexes. So third thing is that the suspected patient of HIT should have evidence of this presence of these immune complexes of platelet factor 4, heparin and IgG. And fourth, that presence of such immune complexes should show that they can activate the platelets present in the patient's body and can perpetuate the vicious cycle of this whole thrombotic episodes. So this what we are referring to is the acute hit, when we say that the patient is having thrombotic potential due to exposure of heparin in the past, and they are having thrombocytopenia, as well as this functional potential of this immune complexes to activate the platelets and cause some thrombosis or widespread thromboembolic phenomenon. So the hit that we normally refer to is acute hit, but we should understand it is not the acute hit, but there is a whole spectrum of it. A suspected hit, acute hit, suspected hit when there is some clinical probability of having a hit, and heparin exposure history, and that I'll tell in the next slide that what is the pre-test probability of having hit. So this is the suspected hit. Then there is acute hit. Then there is subacute hit A. In this category, the thrombocytopenia recovers, but the patient continues to have the evidence of this immune complexes, as well as functional assays are also positive, showing the ability of these immune complexes to activate the platelets and cause the having the prothrombotic potential. The subacute hit B, when the thrombocytopenia has recovered, the patient is having evidence of immune complexes, that is they are positive by enzyme immunoassay, but they are negative by the functional assays. And the remote hit, when the around after 3 months, like after 85 days, the patient is having a history of HIT, but there is no thrombocytopenia, there is no evidence of immune complexes, and there is no evidence positive functional assays. So there is whole spectra, and we should have a concept of this whole spectra while diagnosing HIT and while treating HIT. So how to suspect the HIT? So a very good test at our hand is the 4T scoring system, and it has 4 components like acute thrombocytopenia, timing of onset, and thrombosis, and other probable causes of thrombocytopenia. So with this tool, we can divide the patient into 3 categories, that is low probability, less than or equal to 3, score 4 or 5, having intermediate score, and more than equal to 6 is having high score. So how to proceed for HIT? So we have to first have a clinical probability by the 4T test, and if the patient is having intermediate or high probability, we should subject that patient for enzyme immunoassay. And if the patient is again positive by this enzyme assay, then the patient should be subjected for serotonin release assays. So if the diagnosis of HIT is established, then what should be the course of action? Naturally, so as this is heparin induced, so what should we do? Obviously, we should discontinue the heparin. Now, as the name reveals, it is heparin induced thrombocytopenia. So obviously there will be thrombocytopenia. So shall we transfuse platelets? So the answer for this is no, because we should transfuse platelets only if the platelet count is very low and there is some active bleeding going on. Otherwise, there is always a theoretical risk of aggravating the thrombosis by activation of the transfused platelets as well. So we should always refrain from transfusing platelets, and unless there is very great bleeding risk, we should not transfuse platelets to the patient. Now we cannot administer the patient the heparin, we cannot transfuse the patient the platelets, but we know that the HIT is a prothrombotic state. Then what alternatives of anticoagulant do we have? So we have vitamin K antagonist. So shall we give vitamin K antagonist? The answer to this is no, because as we all know that while administering warfarin and other vitamin K antagonist, initially the patient lands into prothrombotic state because of inhibition of the protein C and protein S, the natural anticoagulants present in the human body. That's why the concept of bridging with low molecular weight heparin is there in clinical practice. So we should not administer vitamin K antagonist in cases of HIT. So in another instance, suppose if the patient was already on vitamin K antagonist as well as heparin, and patient is diagnosed of heparin induced thrombocytopenia, then what should be the course of action? The answer to this is that we should stop the vitamin K antagonist, we should stop the heparin, and we should administer vitamin K. Reason behind it is that there are very body of literature that reveals that if continuation of vitamin K antagonist in cases of heparin induced thrombocytopenia have given rise to skin necrosis, limb gangrene. The skin necrosis is known as warfarin skin necrosis. So we should refrain from administering vitamin K antagonist. Rather, we should administer vitamin K to these patients. So the other options present at our hand is direct thrombin inhibitors and the direct acting oral anticoagulants. I will elaborate these when I'll be discussing the guidelines. So what is the relevance of HIT in COVID-19? So as we all know that since the emergence of this pandemic and when the pandemic was spreading worldwide, there were a large body of literature that shows that this COVID-19 is giving rise to disseminated thromboembolic phenomenon. So there's multiple literatures, and this is a review that was published in May 2020, and they have recommended to use the low molecular weight heparin unanimously everywhere, and they have shown that not only this anticoagulant property, but this low molecular weight heparin is having other properties as well, like the reduction in interleukin 6. So the whole international national guidelines, treatment guidelines, had they incorporated the use of low molecular weight heparin into their treatment protocol for the COVID-19. But later on, there was many reports, some autopsy reports as well, that despite patient being on therapeutic anticoagulation, there were evidences of disseminated thromboembolic phenomenon in the form of pulmonary embolism, DVT, limb gangrene, myocardial infarction, cerebrovascular accidents, and so on. So, while this was then the researchers have studied the coagulation profile, and they were strikingly there was this first case series were published in May when by Riker et al. They have demonstrated 3 cases of heparin-induced thrombocythemia, and then further on by Lingamanini et al. The by Ogawa, by Tran et al. The one case report of acute limb ischemia. The patient was actually having heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Then by Patel et al. And similarly, there were so many case reports, case series being reported who are having evidences of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Why it is important? Because if the patient is having thrombocytopenia and thrombosis despite on therapeutic anticoagulation and you are suspecting HIT, continuation of heparin for these patients can be catastrophic. It can be limb threatening as well as life threatening. So this gentleman, Warkentin et al. Is a very learned man. He has devoted his work to this HIT. So he came up with this review article, and they have just studied the COVID-19 hypercoagulability versus the HIT hypercoagulability, and they came to this recommendation that whenever you are administering heparin to a case of COVID-19, you should always follow this intermediate and this 4T scoring in them, and all the cases who are intermediate or high probability cases, they should be subjected to for enzyme assays for presence of heparin platelet factor 4 antibodies, and if they are positive, they should be subjected to serotonin release assay. Now, they have also said that if the patient is highly positive on enzyme immunoassay and the patient is SRA negative, then the patient should be referred to lab for newer platelet activation assays rather than the conventional serotonin release assay. This I will elaborate in later slides. So moving on to the next slide. So this HIT is not new for the medical world. We have already known it, and we have already some guidelines. Earlier it was published in 2012, and then it was revised in 2018, and there are recommendation and guidelines. The need of the hour is that the way this COVID-19 pathophysiology is evolving, and our understanding of the concept of this COVID-19 is day by day increasing. We should have an apt observation for the diagnosis of HIT, and we are already having this HIT-VTE guidelines. The need of the hour is to integrate all these three to have a better and effective treatment protocol for the COVID-19 patients. So the recommendation in the 2018 guidelines are that we should use 4T score for the clinical probability of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. And if it is low, means it is less than equal to 3, then we should not subject the patient to any kind of HIT lab testing, and we should not discontinue heparin, and we should not go for non-heparin anticoagulants. If you are having a suspicion of HIT in COVID, then what should be the course of action? So the recommendation is that calculate the 4T score. If it is low probability, then HIT is unlikely, and continue heparin, do not order HIT lab testing. Now, if the intermediate probability or if it is high probability, then obviously you should discontinue heparin, switch to non-heparin anticoagulants, or order HIT lab testing. So what therapies these guidelines recommend for the cases? As we know that platelet transfusion has been contraindicated, or rather say relatively contraindicated, and vitamin K antagonist you cannot use. So the choice of non-heparin anticoagulants will obviously depend on the drug factors like availability, cost, and ability to monitor, route of administration, and half-life. The patient factors like the clinical stability, the bleeding risk, and the kidney and liver function. and obviously the experience of the treating clinician. The drugs in our armamentarium are normally the injectable argatroban and bivalirudin. They are having shorter duration of action. Critical illness, increasing bleeding risk, or increased potential need for urgent procedures. Obviously, these drugs are favored. But in clinically stable case with average or low bleeding risk, you can use fondaparinux and direct acting oral anticoagulants. So if you are having a case of high test probability, and you got a positive, you ordered an immunoassay test, then either it will be negative or positive. If it is negative, then obviously you resume heparin and it is unlikely. But if the enzyme immunoassay turns out to be positive, you have to send a functional assay. If the functional SRA is positive, then consider it as a diagnosis of HIT is established, and you should avoid heparin and continue with non-heparin anticoagulants. But if the SRA is negative, then there is a probability that HIT is unlikely. But then again, as I told, that there is one probability that there could be high, if the enzyme immunoassay is highly positive, there is a high probability on clinical 4T scoring, and then we should understand there is one entity known as SRA negative HIT. So when we discuss it, so it can be a false negative HIT, means there is heparin induced thrombocytopenia, but we are not able to demonstrate it because there are limitation of type of functional assay and the technical expertise of the laboratory. So if you get a high probability 4T score, this you have to understand, it is not intermediate, it is high probability, like the score should be more than equal to 6, and the immunoassay is strongly positive. Usually they give the values in optical density if it is more than 2, and the functional assay is negative, then you should consider it as a presumptive diagnosis of HIT, and you should treat according to HIT, because continuation of HIT continuation of heparin in any case of suspected, in any case of HIT can be limb threatening as well as life threatening, and will be having some devastating consequences. So it is better to avoid that devastating consequences. So take home message will be that all the cases of COVID-19 who are exposed to heparin, and if there is intermediate to high probability, this heparin should be stopped, patient should be evaluated for HIT, and patient should be given the therapy as I already discussed. So the limitations of this is that we don't have any test to predict the HIT, because the 4T test is also valid when we have already administered the HIT and there is some response to that administered HIT, administered heparin in the form of either thrombocytopenia or others, some likely causes of thrombocytopenia. So once we have triggered the prothrombotic state by the administration of heparin, only then we can have this clinical predictors also. So this is another limitation. The third limitation is obviously the availability, feasibility, and turnaround time of the lab tests. The other limitations are that direct thrombin inhibitors are not always available at every medical setup, every institution, and need of frequent monitoring is another limitation, and clinicians experience, because so many people who are working for the COVID people may not have the good experience with direct thrombin inhibitors and their monitoring, and there are no large studies on direct acting oral anticoagulants to suggest or recommend the use of it, because all the studies, especially with the rivaroxaban, they have recommended, but they are not larger randomized controlled trials. They are smaller studies, and so very strong recommendation cannot be made on that. So this was all about my presentation, and I really hope to get over this COVID pandemic so that we can have a real and physical conference rather than having this virtual one. Thank you.